We call this board meeting of the Nelson County Board of Education to order on June 6, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. People, we have to hurry this along because Pat Berry's dog cannot be left alone for too long. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Please join the Nelson County Board as they lead in the pledge. Let's all stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the meeting goals and agenda. That's Superintendent Bradley, please.
Similar to every June, we receive annual policy and procedure updates from the Kentucky School Board Association and other agencies, along with the members of the district office. Tonight will be our first reading of policy and procedure updates for the 23-24 school year. We also have time to evaluate some of the recent feedback from community forums and determine and discuss next steps for facility planning.
Okay, thank you. Next item is our state and federal compliance, our annual policy and procedures update. That would be Ms. Kristen.
Hello. Good afternoon. So as you know, it's that time of year again that we go through our annual policy procedure update from KSBA. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to review these beforehand. I'm going to do my very best to get through these as efficiently and quickly as possible so Miss Berry can get home to her dog.
That's right.
All right. So we are going to start with our policies. All of these have been recommended by KSBA's legal team. The ones that have not, I'll be sure to point out the names of the staff members that recommended them. So we have policy number 03.11, hiring, recommended by KSBA, legal change to update the state job posting system. 03.115, transfer of tenure, is a legal change that allows teachers to retain their continuing service contract for a period of 7 months from the time the employment ends in one district and begins in another district. 03.1161, coaches and assistant coaches sponsors, legal change that requires all middle and high schools to be equipped with AEDs and coaches be trained on use of portable AEDs and maintain a CPR certification. 03.1201, salary deductions, a legal change from Senate Bill 7, which prohibits districts for deducting membership dues of an employee
Chris, I think we skipped 909.122, 09.1222. Mm-hmm. And the next one. Non-resident students, 09.1222. Maybe it's not on yours. 09.122 non-resident students. This was added by the Office of DPP. Removal of payment of tuition for non-resident students. And then 09.124 tuition. Remove processing fee component. Mm-hmm.
Emergency medical regarding bill fire doctor state 09 09 state regarding fire doctor all 09 pre-eligibility athletic regarding in 09 regarding definition 9.45 assault and threats of violence legal change regarding Bill 538 for all in the if 09 corrupting education regarding Bill 538 disruptive education process and option agreement 09.43 change regarding Bill 538 regarding 09 oh sorry is that better? Okay. 09.434 suspension. Legal change regarding House Bill 538 defines chronically disruptive to the educational process and adds statutory guidelines for suspension. Okay. 09.4341 alternative education. Legal change that allows students to be placed in an alternative program or setting in lieu of expulsion, allows participation in programs to address student learning needs. 09.435 expulsion. This is recommended a legal change by KSBA as well as addendums by Melissa Case. Legal change regarding House Bill 538 requires expulsion for at least 12 months if a student makes threats that pose danger to others, requires local policy regarding off-campus. Recommendation by Melissa Case is the addition of Expulsion Review Committee, the ERC. Currently, the hearing is before the board. In this case, the hearing would take place with the ERC. Then the ERC would present and make a recommendation to the board for a final decision. 10.5, visitors to the school. Legal change regarding Senate Bill 80 includes loitering in mobile businesses as part of restrictions for registrants on and within 1,000 feet of school grounds. Okay, on to the procedures. 03.11 AP 2521, criminal history record information. Updated FBI policy changes required training from every 24 months to every 12 months. 03.1211, AP 21, employee requests for optional salary deductions. KSBA legal change regarding Senate Bill 7, which prohibits districts from deducting any membership dues of an employee organization, membership organization, or labor organization from payroll. 03.123 AP2, leave request form and affidavit. House Bill 319 removes requirement that an affidavit be submitted for sick and personal leave, replaces affidavit with statement. 03.19 AP23, district training requirements. House Bill 331 requires training for use of AEDs. 03.221 AP22, classified checklist. House Bill 32 permits hiring of classified personnel without high school diploma if the opportunity to obtain a GED is provided by the district. 03.223 Appendix 2, leave request form and affidavit. House Bill 319 removes requirement that an affidavit be submitted for sick and personal leave, replaces affidavit with statement. 05.4 AP1, use of automated external defibrillators, AEDs. House Bill 331 requires each school to have a written cardiac emergency response plan, maintain portable AEDs in every middle and high school, and athletic practices and competitions. 05.4 AP23, compliance with automated external defibrillator AED requirements. House Bill 331 requires each school to have a written cardiac emergency response plan, maintain portable AEDs in every middle and high school, and athletic practices and competitions. 05.4 AP231, automated external defibrillator AED reporting form. House Bill 331 requires each school to have a written cardiac emergency response plan, maintain portable AEDs in every middle and high school, and athletic practices and competitions. 05.4 AP232, AED inspection log. House Bill 331 requires each school to have a written cardiac emergency response and maintain portable AED every middle and high school and athletic practices and competitions. 07.13 AP1 RFR of school food service supplies. House Bill 522 increases the aggregate contract amount maximum $40,000. 08.23 AP21, harmful to minors complaint resolution process. Senate Bill 5 requires the board to adopt a compliant resolution policy for parents and guardians regarding material, a program, or an event that is harmful to minors. 09.4341 AP11, alternative education. Revisions to 704 KAR 19002 require the district to develop procedures for monitoring the alternative education program. 03.211 AP2, medical examination form. KSBA does not recommend including forms from other agencies in the procedures since agency changes may be missed, resulting in employees using outdated or incorrect forms. 09.12 AP22, non-resident student admission and enrollment. Senate Bill 145 removes the statutory eligibility restriction for non-resident students in interscholastic athletics.
We'll go back to the Office of DPP made a recommendation on 09.11 AP21, application for out-of-area request, alignment of language and application location. Then we'll go to 09.1222.
Okay. 09.1221 AP21, request for 504 shortened school day form requested by Madeline Tucker. The only form that exists currently is for the IEP shortened school day. We are adding a 504 specific shortened school day form to the NCS procedures. 09.4291 AP2, grievance initiation form students, appeal of a school level decision recommended by Melissa Case, form updated to include district administrative emails.
09.124, another tuition, same as last, allows for option for the board to charge tuition if it so chooses. Office of DPP recommendation.
09.4291 AP 21, student hearing notice, recommended by Melissa Case, revised to include the hearing to be held by the expulsion review committee and the option to waive the hearing. This policy introduces the procedures for an expulsion to include the expulsion review committee, the ERC, shall consist of the Director of Pupil Personnel, the Director of Environmental Safety, the Director of Mental Health, the Academy Principal/Designee, recommending school principal, and when appropriate, the Director of Special Education.
Good job.
Just well, a quick question here, and maybe more so for Superintendent Bradley, and it goes across two of the policies and one procedure, and they're all around the tuition piece. So the procedure one that we just looked at there at the bottom has the option to say may charge tuition, whereas the policies up top, any reference at all to tuition has been stricken. So do we need to make sure that there's some sort of consistency there? Maybe that there's a may in the policies as well? And of course, in the past, whenever I know this is all based upon the school choice bill, you know, to get away from a district charging $4,000 of tuition and so on. I know in the past in our district, we've charged a nominal fee. I think at one time it was $175. For some people, it's not nominal, but it was a nominal fee just to keep people from bouncing back and forth between districts. Oh, I don't like this teacher, so let me go to this district. Oh, now they've made me mad in this district. Let me go back to this one. So I guess the question is, one, will we decide as a board that we do want that option, if it allows it, to charge a tuition? Then if so, we need to make sure that all three, the two policies and the procedure, all align to have similar language.
I'm assuming the recommendation is based on flexibility. Alex, you want to speak to some of that?
Right. That was 90s fall, 90s spring, and that processing fee phrasing is interchangeable with tuition. Yeah, okay. What this procedure here at the bottom? I mean, if there's a legal change that prevents any charge of tuition, then, you know, that would be a question, is whether or not that procedure is even needed at all. I think that's what you're getting at, right? So this is, I mean, it's just the first reading on policies next week, isn't it? It will be second reading for policies. The procedures, I mean, if we can just kind of get some clarity on that, just so we have consistency across those two policies and the one procedure.
So we'll follow up with a email to the board by Friday, just to say, after Alex gets some chance to step back and evaluate it.
Any other comment? So this being just a first reading, we don't take action on anything anyway.
We do. We just approve the first reading.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Probus.
Okay, our next item is next strategic decision.
We do need to take a motion to approve the first reading.
We're going to motion the first reading without the improvement, without any clarification on.
I don't think that one policy really inhibits us from.
If anything, it would be a procedure would be removed, is kind of what I'm hearing as a possibility. Policies may stay the same, wording-wise, the two policies.
Okay, then I need a motion to approve such policy and procedure updates.
Motion.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jackie, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Norman. We have a motion to approve the policy and a second to approve the policy and procedure updates. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, next we have our strategic decision-making community forum and facility planning, Superintendent Bradley.
So obviously, we've been talking about facilities for quite some time. Most recently, following discussion in March and April regarding next steps for facility planning, members of the board were presented with 9 facility options. Board members then discussed those options and centered around 3 major opportunities for discussion at the May 2023 meeting. They were very broad discussions at that time. We had community forums that followed on May 18th and May 22nd. A number of stakeholders provided initial feedback on those big ideas. So tonight we're reviewing some of that information. If you look to the back, to my left, to everyone's left, those are a number of posters and questions that were a part of those conversations. Obviously, those of you that attended the meetings, the meetings were heavily attended by people that supported a West Side Middle School. I say that just to be transparent, because I think that was pretty obvious. There were posters all over tables, and there were probably, of the tables, there were probably 60 to 70% of the tables that wrote a lot of feedback. Some of it's very redundant, some of it's not. 25% or so of tables didn't necessarily didn't write anything. So those posters are also over there. The goal would be to give the board 5 to 7 minutes to just look at some of the questions and posters and think about any questions or trends that we're acknowledging. I think we did see value in allowing people to do most of the talking and thinking in small groups. And that's really where we are tonight. So we've had some very basic community discussions around those 3 big ideas. Tonight we're back to board discussions and thinking about that. Doesn't mean we can't have more community forums or change the shape of those, but that's where we are. So the goals for tonight, other than Miss Berry getting, I guess it'd be Pat, making sure that her dog is safe. Other goals include revisiting data shared, reflecting on feedback and questions from the community, and discussing next steps for the facility planning process. For those of you who were there, this was the handout that was given. In May at Bloomfield, we talked about the roots of decision-making in facilities, and that's what the process was built around. We also talked about the middle school reality that we've continued to discuss over the past 2 years in Nelson County, and in which we say that students across Kentucky are getting access to more academic and athletic programs in middle schools, in the average middle school beyond ours. That's no secret. I think additionally, we've talked about financial impact. We're currently paying more and getting less in return for that due to the operational cost. In May, we talked about really largely facility planning is a conversation about district growth. We think about growth, long-term growth. Facilities are always a part of that conversation. These were the 9 options that we discussed. For those of you that were there in May, you saw these, and there's a lot going on in there, obviously. But those were the 9 options. We centered it around 3 big ideas. They were presented on this piece of paper, of which you will see in the back left corner, of which people wrote on. There were 5 themes that we looked at: student opportunities and future growth, student equity, family engagement and location of schools, career and technical learning opportunities, and financial value. And I think this is a part of a conversation too. This graphic looks, and it's kind of odd, but if you look at, this is the percentage informed by real facility plan data. We look at those key pieces on the left: student opportunities and future growth, student equity, family engagement, location, financial value. If we say that we have approximately 45,000 people in Nelson County's community, of those, it looks like about 15,000 are under the age of 20, so we got about 30,000 people, give or take, that could be engaged in this conversation. We'd say about 3% of those people right now have awareness of any of this information, just looking at where we've been over the past 2 years. Nelson County schools families, we think 10%-ish have awareness of the information. We think about the staff in our schools, we think it's about 30%. And then the bottom one there, I think it's important to know that this information is driven by feedback from data that's provided. The data that's provided is focused on those things on the left, At the bottom, the local planning committee, 100% of people on that local planning committee had data related to these that led to discussions. Obviously, we now in this room, also most of us we'd be a part of that conversation of people that have awareness of this data. It's important when we think about we're making decisions. Most people don't have this information. Currently, I don't know how many people are watching on YouTube or might watch this video, but it's probably a couple hundred at most. So that adds potentially to this percentage. Briefly, when we talked about opportunities, we talked about students in class, real access to programs, the more students, the more opportunities. We talked about our current reality for this coming year. This is where we are in our middle schools, projected. So we're at an average of about 120 between Bloomfield and OKH, around 40 still at Bloomfield and Boston and New Haven. We talked about where do students in our district live. And I will say this is updated data that the Office of DPP put together using addresses of students across our county. This data is better data than what we were using even 2 years ago as we look at this information. We talked about that. We also talked about this in May, the impact of distance and growth. I think the reality is, if we look at the current population of students in the Cox's Creek area in the Bloomfield district, you'll see in the Bloomfield area we have 11% of students not attending Bloomfield, but as you go further west, it grows. All in all, this is about 90 students that are not attending Bloomfield Middle School. Currently, there are 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that should be. Again, this is no one's fault. It's not Bloomfield's fault, certainly not Bloomfield Middle School. But I think if you take that across this percentage across 13 grades, it's about 400 students. We also talked about career and technical realities. How do we continue to expand for middle schools? Talked about equity and the importance of equity in our systems that we develop. Currently, we know that our systems are diluted to set up success with real access to quality programs in some of our K-8s due to the scale of those. We also talked about just expanding the ceiling on middle school. Currently, middle school has a lot of classes you have to take for students. We want to continue to amplify opportunity for middle school students, and we've talked about ways you can do that. From a financial standpoint, we've talked about staffing inefficiencies and the reality that our smallest schools are obviously more expensive from a staffing standpoint and operational duplication. In the same way, we see those. As I mentioned, there was an advertisement run in the newspaper about 2 months ago about administrative costs, and this is exactly right. This right here talks about administrative costs because of the duplication efforts we have in our schools. The reality is we would like to take this $1 million that we're spending on operational duplication, on administrative costs, utilities, maintenance, transportation, and provide that back to more modern buildings, instructional materials, student programming, staff salaries, and recruitment. And lastly, as we think about money, we think about where do we get the greatest value for students? And currently, our middle school are our greatest needs, and do we do that through additions and modernization or new construction? We have somewhere between $75 and $95 million at the board's disposal to consider over the course of the next 3 years. So I share this data to say this is the data that was presented at the community forums. So people had this information when they were writing down comments and questions. They didn't just come up with these questions. There may be additional data we need to find, but as we look at these 3 plans from the community forum data, we just want to provide 7 to 10 minutes for the board team, and then really we'll open it up for discussion as we think about these questions here. What questions were asked, what was important to our community, what do we want to share with our community? Those are very broad questions, but those are just a starting point to think about what matters to the board as we look at this conversation. So the goal would be that you'd have some space to just look at some of the questions. It's unlikely that we were able to see some of these comments and data. Some of these happened at Thomas Nelson, some of them happened at Nelson County High School. So my goal would be just set the timer for 7 minutes and then come back and the board would open up the floor for discussion.
Get a chance to read and look at some of the information that's on these posters?
Right, so there's questions on the left, and then there's some posters, and the posters go around. Some of the posters are piled on top of each other because they basically say the same thing. So is just no need in putting them all up. So that was the goal. So providing some space to acknowledge some of the conversations and then coming back. And again, as I acknowledge, most of the people at these forums, were people that were interested in a West Side Middle School. So you're going to see that trend, obviously. So, all right.
and the dog is waiting. That's right, the dog is waiting. Okay.
You guys can check the numbers on this. These numbers may be a little off, but 3% would be 900 people in the community having access to this information. That may be a little high. 10% would mean 450 of our families have access to it. 30% would mean about 150 staff members, which is probably, I think, closely accurate. So I share that only to say, as we discuss this, we assume, this is still a small sliver of reality as we talk about some of this information that we have. So these are 3 questions. We don't have to necessarily discuss these questions. I just use them as a basic entry point. And really, I won't say any more about this particular process. You guys can take this from here.
Okay, I'll start it out. I'm looking at these questions and I see number 3, what do I want to share with our community? I want to share, to me, we have 3 very important issues immediately that needs to be addressed. We need the middle school kids from Boston and New Haven addressed immediately. We also need to reimagine, renovate New Haven Elementary. That's high on my list. And the 3rd issue on my list is the Up Center. Okay, because I see that as a very important issue too, because we have the money we have the grant for the Up Center. And the other issue, to me, is just important. The beginning and the end, the elementary schools and the Up Center. So that is my thoughts at the present time. To me, we need to do these 3 items the very first thing with our resources. And that's the way I look at it. Do we have any other comment, please?
Well, and I would agree. I think that, we're not as different as you think. I think what it comes down to is prioritizing. And really, I think when we get down to, what are we disagreeing on? I think more than anything, it's probably in what order do we do these things, which are good things, but in what order do we do them? And reasonable minds can differ on what that is. The community campus was presented and voted on multiple times, and it did not pass with the board that we have seated right here. It didn't. That would have prioritized the building of the middle school over there at Thomas Nelson. Okay, so if we're looking at moving forward, I think instead of looking at what we disagree on, I wish we would look at what do we agree on. Like New Haven absolutely they need help. We need to move forward on that project. And in order to be able to move on that project, we have to come up with a plan for the middle school students that are there and at Boston. Now, there's different options for that, and there's no perfect solution. And we also need to acknowledge that. I mean, we cannot sit up here and solve all the problems. And if we pretend to, then we're lying to you. We can't solve them all. What I would like to see, and I'm one member, so this is just, I would like to see us move forward on the New Haven project. I really would. I would like to see us immediately, as quick as possible, meet the needs for the middle schoolers in Boston and New Haven who need the access. I mean, I think the principals and the teachers, and I mean, they've made the case to me that it's difficult to do what they need to do in the confines and in the system they've got. It's not ideal, but we have the space within existing facilities to be able to move them. That would solve that problem. Maybe it wouldn't solve it forever, but it would solve it for now. But the ability to meet that need right away frees up the money that we could spend that money on the Area Technology Center. Okay, we have grant money, we understand that. But they had anticipated being able to use Old Kentucky Home Middle School. And so that's not an option if that plan was adopted. We would be using Old Kentucky Home Middle School as a middle school. So we would need to look at what does that look like if we're expanding, maybe getting it under one roof, maybe look at moving the baseball field, whatever it takes. That is an important priority. I think that's something we all agree on. Maybe we don't all agree on how to do it, but I think we all agree in the value and the investment there. And that would also allow us to look at Nelson County High School too. That is the order. I mean, if we're talking about the order in which to do things, that's where I am. I feel like that would be, we could move forward on projects that we all agree on. It leaves everything on the table. I mean, it does. Everything is still on the table, guys. You know, when we don't have unlimited bonding capacity now, but we have, you know, enough to start on New Haven and to work on some other projects. And as our bonding capacity builds and as we complete projects, we can look at a better solution to the middle school issue. Now, I want to be clear that the diagram, I think it's number 2 is what I'm referring to, but
Number 1.
Number one, I'm sorry. Number one, I want to be clear that the arrow that takes Woodlawn to Bloomfield, I mean, that is not what I'm proposing. I'm not proposing that people in Woodlawn literally make a right up here and take their children to Bloomfield. That's not an option for me. So that's not how, I'm not anticipating moving those children at all. So, but what that doesn't, I mean, if we're being realistic, what does that not fix? That does not fix the children on 245 going to Bloomfield. Now, I would hope that we would be able to, on a case-by-case basis, grant people relief if they're driving to Bardstown and it's easier for them to take their kid to Okeechobee home. I hope that we could do that. I really do. And realistically, it doesn't solve that problem, and that's a problem that needs to be solved. It doesn't solve the feeder problem or the feeder issue. You know, we would still have children under that scenario. You'd have children at Bloomfield, you'd have children at Okeechobee home. The children at Bloomfield would be going to Nelson County, but the children at Okeechobee home, or no, not even that. They would be splitting into different schools. That's not ideal, but I don't think that is the biggest problem we're facing. I really don't. I think it's an issue that in an ideal world we would fix, and as we get down the road and we get some other projects under our belt, let's fix that, absolutely. But that's where I am, and that's my opinion. It doesn't mean it's right, but that's where I am, so.
Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to hear you all talk about New Haven, because that's one of my reason why I signed back on the school board, get that project going. I'm not a big fan of sending New Haven kids to Okeechobee home, but I see the value of it. And the feeder program, I don't really see a great deal on that. The main thing is they're getting our kids smarter. And I wish our meetings were more about academics here than buildings. I really wish we'd get back on that, is what we need to get back on, focus back on academics instead of worrying about these buildings. Buildings are important, but getting kids smarter and getting them prepared for the real life is our most important things we do right here. And that's what I want to hear more in these building meetings. I know this is very important. But my priorities are New Haven, and ATC and Nelson County is coming in second. I think Nelson County and ATC, Nelson County needs an overhaul there, and it does. It needs some bad. It's in bad repair. But so that's my thoughts on where we're going. I really appreciate Amanda saying we ought to focus on things we can do, and I think there's plenty we can do to move this district forward, and not be sitting here bickering back and forth. I think we need to be focused on what we can do. That's what I'm going to take her advice and. Remember that. That's great advice. Thank you, Amanda.
Looking at me.
You look like you've got a
You're
list.
ready to go.
Meeting's adjourned.
I'm always ready to go.
Yeah, you're ready to go.
Well, I mean, I think Amanda is correct. You know, we can all agree that we want our students to have the best, and we can come together and agree on some things. I think where we probably differ is what that looks like. And, you know, the local planning committee, we looked at all of this data. This wasn't, you know, sort of thrown together last week. Now, I will say that you've gotten really good at what that data looks like and how clear it has become, because I think back to 2 years ago, if these same three options would have been laid on the table with all the data that we're seeing, would we have become a community divided and just wanting to win? That it would have been, one side wanting something so desperately at Boston and New Haven versus a side that didn't want to lose. And I think it would have been different. I think that the outcome of where we are today would have looked differently because I think people felt that only one option was presented. And while that was the case on April of 21, one option was presented. But all of these options were looked at during the LPC. We didn't go in there and just exit and say, yep, we're going with the district facility plan. And when I say district facility plan, I'm not talking about just community campus. I'm talking about every portion of that plan looked at the entire district of Nelson County and put it together and said, what's going to work for everyone? That includes this building. That includes our middle school students. That includes our high school students. That included everyone. This wasn't just a one-sided conversation about the middle school. It has become a one-focus item. It has become, in the last 2 years, focusing on buildings. And it never was about buildings. It was about how do we move forward this community? How do we move Nelson County students forward? And while I believe that short-term, putting our kids at Boston and New Haven in OKH short-term would relieve some of the stress that we're feeling, it does not answer the entire district as a whole. It does not give this building any more. That if we build onto this building, which again would have to go back to the LPC, it would give us 2 to 3 classrooms at best to add onto this building. It would not give us the value of that OKH building. It would give us 1 or 2 spaces, and that's it. So to say that we can make it work is not an accurate statement. So my question is when we look at the district facility plan as a board, are we disagreeing with the district facility plan? Because this is not about community campus. This is about, are we looking at the district facility plan and saying we are not moving forward with that?
Now, there are portions of the district facility plan that we would be moving forward on. There were plans drawn up for New Haven, and we could adopt that. There's portions of it. I mean, the district facility plan included Cox's Creek, which, I mean, it could be several steps down the road, but it included things that I think are valid. It included a remodel in Nelson County. I don't think this is not wanting to, you know, you said it's about people not wanting to lose. And I mean, I for one, I mean, what I've evolved in terms of the thought, just in talking in conversations with teachers and administrators and community members. I'm not looking to win. It's not a win when everyone is, it's not. But I do want to feel like we're moving forward. And I think it's unfortunate. The only thing about, I appreciate all the people that came to the community discussions. I do regret that on there was a community campus plan that has already been voted down. It's a waste of time and energy to talk about, you know, if we're talking about a consolidated middle school. But there are portions of that plan that are good and I think need to be implemented.
So what part of let's just say, what part of having a West Side middle school is off the table?
For me, okay, if you invest the West Side Middle School, if you put the money into that right now, you have tied up a lot of our bonding capacity. Now, would you have done something good? Yes, you would have created a middle school over there. That certainly wouldn't be a bad thing, Tracy, but you would have tied up so much of our bonding capacity that these other projects, which I believe are more urgent, I mean, we have a high school that desperately needs remodeling, and that's going to be a massive expense. The Area Technology Center, you mentioned Old Kentucky Home, and you said just adding a few rooms. I'm not proposing adding a few rooms. Let's reimagine what that looks like on this side. I mean, what you could do here, let's talk about the baseball field and maybe moving that in order to give them the space to do. I'm not talking about add a room and just throw a little money at it. I mean, reimagine what it would look like under one roof. That would also aid. Someone mentioned to me that it would make it a little easier, perhaps, if you're talking about a renovation of Nelson County High School, you're going to get into an issue with what to do with the children while you're renovating. And if you started on this space first, you would have some overflow space to deal with the construction issues and maybe a place for the kids to be able to overflow. So I'm not talking about just a couple
So
rooms.
when it comes to the money piece, because I've heard that one brought up quite often. If I remember right, the original bids that came in for the community campus portion of the building at Thomas Nelson campus was low 20 millions, about 22, 23 million. If I remember the estimates that were being provided for New Haven, to end up doing that as a K-5, and I'll kind of look to Ms. Clark, I thought I saw her there. She may remember the numbers off the top of her head, or Superintendent Bradley. I think that the estimates on that, was that also not somewhere in the high teens, maybe 20?
12.
Oh, it was 12. Okay, so I was over. So about 23 plus 12 is 35. And if I remember right, when we finally allowed the experts on finances, because none of us are financial experts, the experts on finances that provide bonding advice to 2/3 of the school districts in Kentucky, they said, if I remember right, as of right now, we're somewhere in the $50 million range of bonding capacity.
Yeah, around 50.
So 23 plus 12 is 35, okay? So we've got 10 million for the ATC. We know it's going to cost more than 10 million. We don't know how much more, but let's just say 50% more, $15 million. So now we're up to 40, and all of that is work that I think some of us have agreed, especially the ATC in New Haven, is stuff that needs to be starting now, and actually would need to start now, especially at the ATC, to be able to do some of the domino effect, along with the bus garage, because we've got to get the bus garage out of the way to be able to do the work here. We need to be able to get the bus garage out of the way to also be able to clear out all this space straight out from here, which is softball and bus garage area, because the original district facility plan, the overall Nelson County campus plan, was to have an entirely new Nelson County High School wing to be built out this direction. And that way then, as high school students were not being interrupted with construction, they would still be in the current high school. Once that wing was done, then they'd be moved into there. And then the community campus middle school work could start on that far edge of the Nelson County High School. I guess, as I'm rattling through some of those, the point I'm trying to make is I've heard money mentioned several times, and yet we continue to hear the experts, the ones that we have to rely upon when it comes to bonding capacity. The experts say it's there. And so for us to say we would be using up all of our bonding capacity is not really an accurate statement, as well as the statement I've heard many people in the community state. I've heard some people give false information, it's going to cause your taxes to go up. No, it's not. The tax rate is what it is. It's that triple nickel. That's there. It is what it is. It's not like there's a fourth nickel that would get added. So when we talk about facts, financially, this entire district facility plan, as it would be laid out with a domino effect, because a lot of these pieces rely upon other pieces of it to be accomplished in an order, the finances would be following right along with it, the bonding capabilities. Now, I'll tell you something that I'm really concerned about, Wes. You're flipping through a lot of these. Flip back to the one that has the zip codes for me. Okay, they're back to back. These are the two I wanted to look at again. So I know that, we can get very tribal in communities. I'm a New Havener, I'm a Bloomfield, I'm a Cox's Creek, I'm a Bardstonian. We're Nelson County. And so to me, what we have to look at when we're a school board is the entire Nelson County community. I know right now there are people in Bloomfield, District 5, which is the district I'm voted in from, that probably hate my guts. They probably just soon string me up on a gallows somewhere, because for some reason, I'm not out here saying, oh, by God, Bloomfield Middle School better never close. But let's stop and think about some things, because we want to talk about how long New Haven has sat on the back burner. Mid-90s, Bloomfield Middle School was built, the current one. It was built there because there was a Bloomfield Junior High, which was there because there was a Bloomfield High School at one time. So, Bloomfield Middle School gets built, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in the mid-90s. Already, and these are things I learned from past board members. So already, the board back 20 plus years ago also knew that Chaplin and Eli Brown was a great little school. My daughter started at it. She was there for kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade. Kindergarten and 1st. Anyway, however long she was there, that's where she started. But both of those school buildings were considered, I think the phrasing is a Category 5. Basically, they were buildings that, you know what, the state was looking at us going, get those kids out of those buildings, and we're not going to let you spend money on them. You've got to build a new building. I was told that Bloomfield Middle School was built to be turned into a K-8 school. The underground tubing for the geothermal system was oversized for that very purpose. The plan was that extending out towards where the Bloomfield Elementary School is right now is where there was going to be some extra classrooms built on, and it was going to be turned into a K-8. I mean, the idea was community schools, New Haven, Boston, Bloomfield. Early 2000s, apparently the school board was going to do that, and there was a group of people that threw a fit and said they wanted a separate elementary school there. And why I'm sharing this is to drive home this point about money. That elementary school at that time in the early 2000s, and again, I'll say it's great elementary school, great staff. Both of my kids went through it. You know, they had great experiences and you know, had great relationships with the staff. That building probably cost about $22 to $25 million in the early 2000s. An addition onto Bloomfield Middle School probably would have been about $10 to $12 million. So there's an extra $10 to $12 million there that could have been spent 20 years ago on New Haven. But yet it was because there was this determination that there had to be 2 school buildings in the far northeastern corner of the county. And then what's that caused us? It's caused us to get to this point right here. There is 67% of the students, 2/3 of the students in the Nelson County schools live in that little corridor there. Yeah, I'm sure there might be a few of them above or below that rectangular box, but 67% of them live there. And that's not to say that Bloomfield's a bad place to live. That's not to say that Boston, oh, why would anybody want to live in Boston? It's just facts. It's data. It shows us where people are living in this community. And whenever we start hearing things about students, loss of students, people like to make that be the narrative of, oh, it is because of Mr. Hill at Foster Heights. He's a terrible leader. Look at the scores they've got. Oh my God, it's so bad. Oh, it's that Superintendent Bradley. He just keeps running people off. No. It's those people that are in that 14%, those people that are on the western edge of that 53% that are saying, you know what? I don't want to go all the way out to Bloomfield. And so where are they going? It's not rhetoric. Where are they going? They're going to Bardstown. They're going to St. Gregory. Some of them are even going to OKH. So what we've got is over a long period of time. This is not a problem that got created 3 or 4 years ago. It's not a problem that got created 2 years ago when this district facility plan was starting to be talked about. This is a problem that was created over in a long, extended period of time. Some people will say K-8s are great. That's the way they need to be. We want to keep our kids down in our local community. K-8s worked 30 years ago in this kind of a county, the way we're laid out and where our populations are. There are still some K-8s in the state, but those K-8s are in places that aren't rural like New Haven. New Haven's not rural. Bloomfield's not rural. Come on, people. 10 minutes, you're in Bardstown. 25 minutes from Bloomfield, you're in Louisville. I can be at the castle on Versailles Road, there on the edge of Lexington, from my house in 35 minutes. We are not rural in this community. So that's something else that we need to start getting out of our lexicon here, that, well, you know what, we're a rural county, it's just gonna be so far for those kids to go. I tell you, I'm wondering about those students that right now in whatever this Old Bloomfield Road, that little neighborhood subdivision, all that little part, as soon as you turn onto Old Bloomfield Road, I wonder how long it takes them to ride a bus to Bloomfield versus ride a bus if they were coming to this campus. I mean, would there be a big difference there possibly in bus time saved? So, looking at this one here, no, go back. I look at this one here too, and this was something whenever I first saw this at Thomas Nelson High School at the community forum. And I think I made sure to kind of pose the question so that we all, those that were there, understood what some of those acronyms were. You know, out of area, OOA, out of district, OOD. Out of area means I really should go to a different middle school in Nelson County, but I'm going to this one. Out of district is, well, I probably should be going to Nelson County schools, but you know what? Bardstown Middle School is a whole lot closer, so I'm going there instead. What we've got here is the students we are losing, yeah, we're going to lose a few that mom works in Springfield, so hey, you're going to ride with me and we're going to go to Washington County School. We're going to lose a few where people say, you know what, this just isn't the right school district for me, and that's okay. Just like we lose staff that say it's not the right school district. They're not bad staff. We don't have bad leadership. It's just not the right place for that staff person. Maybe they need more money to get their high 3 for retirement. That's what's happening a lot of times. You get into those I see retired teachers shaking their head. You get into those last 4 or 5 years before you can retire, I never blame a teacher to go, you know what? If I can make an extra $20,000 to $25,000 my last 3 to 5 years by just going up to Jefferson County, I'm going to do that. That's going to help my monthly retirement whenever I retire. Good for them. Got to applaud them for making that be a decision that they want to do. But I start looking at these, and what I start seeing is we are losing students, especially on the western half of this community, to Bardstown, St. Gregory, other locations, simply because of proximity. And if we're concerned about the closing of Bloomfield Middle School, what I'd like to look at Superintendent Bradley and say, well, start talking with whoever's left at Bloomfield City Hall and find out, you know, what maybe some of the possibilities are that could be used for down the road. You know, this idea of priorities, I agree. ATC is a priority. We've seen that just in this past year. If you were not at any of the level ups, and I know for some of us, we never heard about them. These level ups where these students were signing with their employer. Don Franklin hired 3 kids. They graduate, they got a full-time job at Don Franklin. RMAG, the group of students that had like 3 or 4 different health services certifications. I mean, they could go down here to Flagler and get a job right now if they wanted to. We've got to make sure, I agree, that the ATC is a priority. We've also got to make sure New Haven's a priority. That should have been done years ago. And every time I say that we've been kicking the can down the road, that this is previous board's issues, and there's been a previous board member that comes and goes, yeah, but we had a great football coach we hired. But we didn't do anything about New Haven. We also did things with facility funds that were probably not the smartest and wisest use of those bonded funds. You know, the example I just gave, $25 million, build a separate building, or it could have just been added on to Bloomfield Middle for about $12 million. So those are priorities. But another priority, and it's something that we've talked about for 2 years, and Tracy, you kind of allude to it, but I'm going to use the phrase that I've used several times. Most of the times with facilities, we talk about bricks. We talk about mortar. We talk about cement, and I would agree then with Mr. Norman. All that is just talking about bricks and cement and mortar. But what was different this time with the district facility plan is we talked about problems. Number one problem being equity for our middle school students. That has really been something that's come to light in this community. Even people that thought they were really involved in our school district or involved in their child's middle school experience have had their eyes opened. Oh my gosh, you mean that one of the reasons why we don't have a lot of extra programs at New Haven is because there's only 4 or 5 middle school teachers and they're already just stretched so thin that they can't do anything else? You know, it's that, they're gone. Is that what you said, is they're gone? Yeah, so, and that is also what is happening because as a board, not me, not Miss Berry, not anybody sitting here, I'm talking about as a board, the body politic has never been courageous or brave enough to do what needed to be done for students. Here's one thing, we'll hear a lot of times, I think, about, well, and no offense, but I'm gonna say it this way, I was voted in to do this. I could care less who voted for me. I could care less who donated, which I'll let you know nobody ever donated to my campaign. I could care less who asked me to make a promise. Because I had a former superintendent that told me the way you can go to sleep every night are the decisions you made what's best for students? Are the decisions you made focused on solving challenges that our students have? And what we're having right now is challenges like what Ms. Clark just referred to, is we have good staff that leave because this board is not brave enough to do what's right for students. We have a district facility plan that a large cross-section of ideas and people put input in on. We've heard community discussions. How many emails have we all received? It's more than 2. I've saved them all. There's a few of them I probably haven't answered, and by the way, Mr. Ayers, I apologize. I think I called you Miss Ayers one time in an email. I was thinking about a good friend of mine, Bernie, who's a female. We've all had that input. My God, and one of the things I did at these 2 community forums, and it's just the way that my approach was on this, and this is how I come up with what creates my thoughts. I didn't sit down with any group. Those of you that were there at the community forums may have noticed someone just kept kind of wandering around. That was me. I wanted to eavesdrop. I didn't want to taint any of the conversations that were happening at a particular table. In fact, I think I only answered one question. It was one table and they asked something that had to do with a number and I gave them the answer for the number and then I just moved on. Everything we see back there. We can say we should get away from this community campus conversation. It's dead. This board voted it down. As a community, we cannot get away from it. It is there in our face. Now, if what that means to be able to solve this challenge that we have for our middle school students, and that is the pivotal set of years. Yeah, every grade is pivotal. But we all know, once you get into that middle school year, not only is it the social and the emotional development, it's the connections with people in your, in this case, school community, but it's also the academic challenges that they need to start being faced. I'm looking over here at Miss Rower. We got to start getting them ready to think about, yeah, Miss Berryman, we got to start getting them ready to think about CTE. Because if we just wait until them, as they're getting ready to schedule their 9th grade year and talk to them about CTE, we've lost out on that then. We're behind the game. So it's the middle school. That is one of the most critical places that we need to be addressing things. So as a board, we can be brave and courageous, or what we can do is we can start talking about, well, you know, let's just ship them all to OKH. I listened to the OKH principal talk and say, I don't think we got the room for it. You can talk about enrollment, you can talk about capacities. That's very different from how many students can be taught in a building. There was an interesting email I got, and this is something I think good for the community to hear. And I apologize, I'm on a roll. I know, I'm on my soapbox. So, got an email from an educator in the district who is a diverse learner teacher. They were a teacher, and some of the rest of us maybe got it too. They were a teacher at Nelson County High School before the high school split. They never had a room. Their room was a mobile cart. They had to beg, borrow, and plead from other classroom teachers to use their classroom during their planning period. I see heads shaking from former Nelson County High School teachers. They had to beg, borrow, and plead to use someone's classroom during their planning. So those students never had a classroom. And it wasn't until the high school split that those diverse learners then had a classroom. So one question I'll throw out there is, have we actually talked with the Bloomfield principal to find out, let's throw another 240 kids into that building, that's 120, I'm just guesstimating, 120 Boston, 120 New Haven. Let's throw another 240 kids into that building. What's that done to our diverse learning teachers in that building possibly? What's that done to just the traditional classroom teachers? I don't know. But my guess would be that it's probably not going to be as conducive to a learning environment. I can put kids in every corner of the building. I can put 30 kids in every classroom. Is that going to provide the best learning environment? 31 years now in K-12 education, I think I know the answer.
But we're a board of 5 people, okay? And we can come here every month and we can argue about it, or we can figure out what we agree on and we can move forward with that. That is really where we are. I mean, we can, because right now, the community campus has not passed. And I understand that you believe in it. I understand there are good things about it.
So, a little clarification there. The community campus did pass. It is in the district facility plan. It was also voted on unanimously the entire year of '22. Everything about it. The plans, the designs, the architecture, everything. Now, I understand that we killed the bonding of that. So we had to end up rescinding the approved bids that this board had approved, which also has created other financial and legal issues. But it hasn't been killed because the community says it's not killed.
It's not gonna, under the current makeup of the board, it hasn't passed.
So
and it's not going to.
So then
It's
what
not
is your
going to.
solution to address the need of middle schoolers, which is what
We can
started the
meet
conversation 2 years ago?
If the equity absolutely is an important thing.
So
And
what's
we
the
can
answer?
provide equity right away using existing facilities. And while doing that, we can allow this bonding money. The projects you described would use up $38 million worth of bonding. I mean, anything at Nelson County High School is going to be $40 million, $50 million. It would be exorbitant, the cost there. So a yes to this is a no to other necessary projects. They're all good. They're all good. I mean, we can all agree that these are good things.
So
We're
then I'll
disagreeing
just
on the
ask this,
priority.
Ms. Dean, then how are we going to solve middle school equity? Please tell us.
Well, when you're moving Boston and New Haven students who are having issues with staffing, having issues with involvement, if you move them to a high school with that number of students, I think there was a graphic with the number of students and how that
where would they be
translates
moved
into
to?
opportunity.
So where would they be moved to?
They would be moved to Old Kentucky Home.
So can Old Kentucky Home accept 240 more students? I know you're going to go back to a capacity list, but have we talked with the instructional leadership of OKH, and the instructional leader has said, oh yeah, we've got a lot of empty rooms that we can put them in.
Well, we can't vote on that tonight without getting into, but if you look at capacity, if you look at the number of students based on 22, 23 enrollment, if you move the students 6th, 7th, and 8th from Boston and New Haven into Old Kentucky Home based on 22, 23, you would have a total of 622 students in a building with a building capacity of 700. So it would be at 89%.
But that doesn't count the 30-plus students from Cox's Creek that will be attending there. So you'll be right at 700 capacity.
And,
I'm going by the 22,
and are we
23.
also taking consideration the diverse learner topic that was just brought up?
We can't vote on it tonight.
Oh, I'm not
We can't vote
asking
on
to
it
vote.
tonight, and it is not without fault. It's not without fault.
But you don't know what we're gonna get anyway. You don't know if some of these students will attend or not. You can go to any school in the county you wanna go to. So we don't really know what
No, and I
it
think that, but
would
that's
be.
but to me, that is also something that we have to be very thoughtful in. Because while I agree, it doesn't make any sense to send students that live across the street from OKH to Bloomfield. It does not
No.
make sense.
No, it
No
doesn't.
more than it
No,
makes sense
nobody
as
wants to do
sending
that.
New Haven and Boston kids to OKH. It doesn't make sense. Because again, you're talking about how many schools do those people pass before they get to that building?
But
Yeah.
Boston and
But
New
wait.
Haven, Boston went to Old Kentucky Home to begin with
Yes,
years
they
ago.
did.
Uh-huh.
Yes, they did.
I remember.
So-
And then
But
they
here-
were asked to
But
come
here's,
back to
here's the
build.
bigger question. When are we gonna look at the challenges that we are going to create for the people in the building? We are trying to fix our personal beliefs up here right now. We're not thinking about, okay, what situations are we gonna put OKH leadership in? What are situations are we gonna put the people in that building in? Because we're removing, that is again why the LPC was so important and why it is made up of district people.
And community people, parents,
Well,
business
And it
people.
needs to be
Understand it.
fleshed out. It needs to be fleshed out. We're just having a very general
Right.
discussion, and we can't answer these questions up here.
One
So
more thing
it
we
absolutely
also-
needs to be.
One more thing we also haven't even considered. I want Nelson County to be school of choice. I don't know about the rest of you all. We have 800 kids that are going to somewhere else.
Yes.
If we only got half of those kids back, where are you gonna put them? Where are you gonna put them? We are, I don't know if you guys are aware, I know you guys are aware, of the wonderful programs going on in our district. The Up Center alone, what you guys are doing here in this building alone is gonna attract students now, not when the new building comes, but now it's attracting students. What's going on at Nelson County and Thomas Nelson in those buildings are going to attract people back. We see it already. I know families that their kids go to Bardstown, but then they come to high school at our high schools. Why do we not want to engage them in our middle and our elementary schools? Why are we leaving them out? Why are we okay with saying, you know what, well, we can, they're leaving, they're coming back to our high schools. Man, well, we'll deal with that 800 kids over there. Even if we got 400 of those kids back, where are we going to put them? We are thinking short term.
Yeah.
And if you all will
Yep.
admit this is a short term and in 2 years we're going to go through a district facility plan, then let's talk about that. But we are having conversation like this is the end all and we're going to just stop right
I'm not,
here. and
I'm
do
not
everything.
proposing it as something that would be in place forever. I'm not proposing it as that. I don't think, I think they're down the road, once we meet our immediate facility needs, we have old buildings, you all, as soon as we get done with Nelson County, we could spend money at Foster Heights. We could go to Cox's Creek. Think of all the buildings.
So Foster Heights was renovated and added on to about 10 years ago, so it's probably in okay shape.
There's,
probably
It's gonna be
It's
soon.
probably an
This
okay
is
shape.
not about buildings again.
but
this
it is
not about
because we don't
buildings.
have an unlimited amount of money. And so that, it is
This-
about just making priorities, and that's where we disagree.
Well, if we want to
Well,
dream
and
at our
so
table,
I want to talk about the priority and the funding piece, because I think that is something that we continue to circle back to about money. And I'll again state that the amount of money we have now bonding capacity, as well as what is projected by the experts, not by Superintendent Bradley, not by Ms. Owens, who I think I saw here maybe.
It's Ms.
Not by
Rogers.
us, by the financial expert, is that the district facilities plan in the domino order that it would need to be done was financially doable. So you say we've got to prioritize.
It
We're
was
already
The proposal,
prioritizing.
the original proposal to
We
fund that was
already
taking money
are
from the general fund.
prioritizing.
okay,
We
hold
already
on.
are prioritizing what needs to be done with the money we have now. The same thing we did with Thomas Nelson High School. The full bonding was not available to do the entire building. It was going to have to be done in 3 phases.
That's why I knew
And
had to
then
get
all of a
theirs.
sudden, no, it's not.
Yeah, it was.
Hold on.
The reason
hold
why
on.
it wasn't done was because of what I described earlier about Bloomfield Middle and Bloomfield
Because
Elementary.
you voted to.
So, Thomas Nelson
New
High
Haven.
School was gonna be in 3 phases. All of a sudden, we discovered that efficiency in construction allowed phase 1 and phase 2, which was the core building and facilities, athletic facilities, other than the, theater, auditorium, whichever phrase, to be done. And then that was done as that additional bonding capacity came. So again, things were being phased on a district facility plan, which is what the current district facility plan was constructed. It was constructed based upon current bonding capacity, projected bonding capacity, and being able to go through that entire set of facility needs, not just to do brick and mortar, but to meet student needs.
So if we go back to these options, and we look at option 1 as being a short-term option, and I know we briefly talked about 8th graders going in, because I think the other thing that we're missing out here is long-term sustainability, or even short-term sustainability for our district financially. We have offered our guaranteed raises for our teachers. If we do not come up with a way to make that happen, there won't be.
What's
those
that gonna do to those teachers?
So we're talking about not really, again, the district facility plan looked at long-term sustainability and allowing some general funds or money that would go back into general funds that would be reallocated for other things. So $1.5 million being somewhat on the low end of what that would look like. So if, let's say we took option 1 and we compromised on that just a little bit, and we put 8th graders in the high school, which would free up OKH to be our 6-7 academy. Now again, those kids would still be separated because they're going to be coming from Bloomfield, they're going to be coming from Boston, Cox's Creek, everywhere. So those kids would still be separated in our high school. We would sort of get the financial stability that the DFP would allow in that. Would that be something that you all would like to dive deeper around?
I think it's worthy of consideration. The only issue I see in the short term with the 8th grade going, if we're looking at a major renovation at Nelson County High School, and we're going to be looking at displacing students, if you're adding in 8th graders, I think you're just compounding your issues. So I think that may be something worthy of consideration when you get a few steps down the road, but I don't think it makes sense to add these students and then to figure out.
So the concern about dispersing students about renovations at Nelson County High School, I believe, got addressed as part of conversations last fall,
It did.
maybe?
That's right.
Stephen Ward, I think it was, came and said, as they've been talking with the stakeholders at Nelson County High School, concerns they brought up were about science labs, I believe was one of them, but then also was about, well, we don't want to have kids having to walk down hallways, go around this one because we got this part blocked off for renovation, which I believe is why eventually it came to the idea, and I think Ms. Berry was one of them that was in support of it, was building essentially it would be a new Nelson County High School portion, 2 stories, that would be coming straight out from the very back end where the cafeteria area is. That's the only way I can describe it right now. And that way then, once it was completed, students move into it, and then renovation in an empty portion of the high school for the community campus. So again, I bring that up to say, well thought out domino effect of making sure we have the least impact on student learning, but the most bang long-term versus short-term.
That is accurate. The current DFP there would be no displacement of students in Nelson County High School.
Okay, but
So I'm just acknowledging that.
So, I mean,
Thank you.
let's go back, let's talk about a few others. So the direction you were going, Ms. Bowling, so looking at the third one, so let's build a new middle school down at New Haven. I know Mr. Norman had brought that up. I mean, I'm sure that's what some people in New Haven would like, and I can get it. I can understand that. That's the reason why I'm sure people in Bloomfield said, no, we want a new middle school and a new elementary school. But if we look at that and then overlay those other two data maps that we were looking at a minute ago, where the percent of students live, where the percent of students that are in district and out of district, and then even as I read some of the comments on the big same map charts back there, some of the comments were, was that going to increase busing costs? Because now we're busing a lot of kids down to the southern part of the county. And I think I heard someone bring up, well, why don't we just build a new middle school at Balltown? Have we thought about the $1 million to buy the piece of property in Balltown? Have we thought about that's going to be a $40 million middle school? So if we want to talk about financial things, we got to be concerned about that.
So just, I actually deleted this information. It was on the slide earlier for those that were looking at YouTube. But originally we had talked, and even Diane and I talked a little bit about this over the last few weeks, was, one of the challenges we face is we clearly have board members that support different ideas, right? And the DFP supports certain ideas and doesn't support other ideas. The DFP would have to change to do certain things. But right now, we have 2 board members that clearly have supported for the last 2 years option 2. Mr. Norman, I don't know if you fully support option 3 or some version of option 3, but that's potentially. So then, and then option 1, which is moving kids to OKH and Bloomfield, I'm not sure that we have 3 votes on that either. I'm just summarizing just in general because I'm in a unique spot too where it's like, I'm just sharing data. And I've been told the data is biased, but the data is the data. That if we look at those 5 things at the bottom, I'm not doing my job if I'm not sharing data related to those types of things. And that's a big part of the conversation for me is when I look at where we are today, we're as close to 2050 as we are to 1996. What that means is I have to think about 2050. Because in 1996, I was a part of a high school just right across the parking lot. I loved my time at Nelson County High School. Amanda, you were there as well. And if you ask people in Nelson County, hey, when was the heyday of Nelson County? Many of them would say 1996, 1997. And that was based around an idea at the time that football was the primary determiner of success. That's 27 years ago. We're still talking about that today. 27 years from now, it'll be 2050. In 2050, I don't think that will be the primary determiner of success. In fact, I think communities that are highly proactive, agile, transformational, that are making long-term decisions that provide flexibility. We need to make decisions that continue to provide agility for our schools and our staff. That was the ultimate goal. And I think we have to be very careful. When I look at principals in the audience today, short-term decision-making in fragile schools makes them even more fragile. And I have to say that because I would be not doing my job if I didn't acknowledge that. When we think about staffing middle schools right now across the county at the current rate, and this isn't a Nelson County issue, this is a nationwide issue. Middle school certification and middle school specialization is fragile, and that was ultimately the reality why we know the future demands more unification of resources. So I think when we look at program opportunities, personalization, family engagement, and location of schools, what we're thinking about here, and financial value, I would just caution the board to hesitate around short-term decisions right now because I believe that it's going to create other short-term problems and make us more fragile. And I say that knowing the day-to-day existence we live. As a superintendent, my job is to make board members aware of the data, make you aware of different pathways and opportunities, and to acknowledge some of those challenges. And it comes down to staffing. It's not even about, it's about where people live. It absolutely matters. We know where people live matters a lot. The data shows us that. We know that. I mean, where we go to the grocery, where we do this, it all depends on what's closest. So at the same time, staffing is the number one determiner of the future. and how do we organize ourselves to be able to do that effectively?
Yeah, that made me think of, the whole idea of, Bloomfield Middle School wasn't in Bloomfield. It's going to kill the Bloomfield economy. I was talking with a former board member who said, no, it won't do that. And then it got me to thinking about, so if you live out 245, but your child goes to Bloomfield Middle School and you need to pick up groceries. Now, there's a grocery store in Bloomfield now. If it's perishables, are you picking them up in Bloomfield, or are you picking them up closer to where you live so they're not in the car for as long of a drive? I think that goes to the where you live piece as well. You said something about staffing, though. I do want to ask, how many middle school teachers did you lose, Ms. Clutter? Just one? Maybe unofficially, there could be more. See, and that's a concern too. It's I know. And I think it was you or it was someone at the community forum down at New Haven said, it's not because the students aren't good students. It's not because the families in the community don't support the school. A lot of it ends up being New Haven's just kind of a stopover for staff because of the uncertainty or the extra workload. And if we're not honoring and trying to help those staff members, that's all, I'm sorry, Ms. Clark, that's all New Haven's ever going to be. It's going to be a stopover. Because they're just going to go, yeah, I can't do 5 preps plus try and do 2 clubs. I'm out here. And I know we can solve that. We think we can solve that short term by moving students to, middle school students to OKH, but I'll still then go back. We haven't even had conversations with principal at OKH and point blank ask, what would that look like? What would staffing look like? What would the building look like? What would the programs look like?
Just as an easy example, we have math vacancies in all of our middle schools currently.
Oh, yeah.
And I share that because middle school is different than elementary school. You have to be specialized. Replacing a math teacher in middle school right now is one of these unique things across the state and across the
If
country.
you're a middle school math teacher, you will have a job forever in just about any district.
So as we look to the next couple of weeks, I think we've talked tonight about where people's head is. I would say there's still, if we look at this conversation between now and 2050, this is, sorry, if you Google fork in the road, this is actually the best picture that comes up. So I would also say this, and this is not to put any board member on the spot, but I think there's still this conversation that exists if we're not interested in uniting feeder patterns.
Well,
That's a larger conversation because the assumption from staff members in the district and the assumption from community is if we're not interested in uniting feeder patterns, then we're really not interested in the success of 2 high schools.
And the last thing I'll say on this
share
is
that.
I'll just mention that, yes, as board members, like we've all said, we bring our personal thoughts into it. I mean, I bring my educator thoughts into this, or I bring my parent thoughts into it, or whatever the case might be. But also as board members, we have to be willing to be courageous and brave and do what is right for students long term, and not just try and come up with a short-term solution, because that will be kicking the can down the road again. Every time I use that phrase, kick the can down the road. I brought this up about 7 years ago. That created the firestorm of we were going to merge Boston and New Haven, or send all the Boston kids to New Haven, or all the New Haven kids to Boston. It wasn't about that. It was about these kinds of problems. My concern back then was these middle school teachers that have nobody other than themselves in that building to rely upon. And I don't know who it was, but the person one time when they heard me say that goes, oh, well, there's phones. They can just call each other. I'm going to just say it. That person is a loon. Okay? They are crazy to think that is the way educators should be treated, to be professionals and collaborate with each other.
I would disagree that it's kicking the can down the road. I look at it as accomplishing things that have to be done and are important and that we can all agree on in the short term, and leaving all those other options on the table. I mean, moving forward with New Haven and the ATC and Nelson County does not eliminate any possibility in the near future with regard to middle schools. It doesn't eliminate anything. It doesn't.
But it kicks the can to address the most severe need we have, which is equity for our middle schools.
Well, I think it would have accomplished that. I think it would have accomplished that. And we just agree to disagree. We could talk all night. We're not going to.
Well, I think,
Yeah.
I'll be extremely blunt here. I think the reality is, while I can see the short-term gains by moving our kids to OKH, I mean, I can tell you right now, Nikki had to leave, but she will tell you straight up, this is the last year Boston can do what they're doing. It's it. We have to have something for them next fall. But if we go into this knowing that that short-term solution is going to last 3 years, 4 years, then you are killing two schools. One of two schools. You're going to kill Thomas
And it's
Nelson,
not just 3 or 4
or you're gonna
years.
kill Bloomfield.
It's another extra 2 years or so on top of that to go through another LPC process, another bid
This-
process, another design process. So yes, we will just kick the can.
This is about making a plan. So if we look at this as, okay, we're going to fix short-term, we're going to fix Boston and New Haven so we get those kids in a better place. And it gives them a breathing room, but we know in 18 months, we're going to be transitioning those kids and Cox's Creek kids to a middle school on the west side of the county. You will have people jump for joy because they are finally being heard. They want something that they can see as a vision. Us talking about short-term solutions is leaving our community with this look of, what does that look like? We know reality because we have 800 kids right now not attending our schools. We know that if we think short-term is 3 years, in 3 years we will be sitting here, or maybe I won't be sitting here, but somebody's going to be sitting here in 3 years saying, what are we going to do with an empty building over there at Thomas Nelson because we're down to 300 kids? Or it's going to be, what are we going to do with that building out in Bloomfield? We're down to 200 kids.
Oh, it'll be less than that because of the families out the 245 corridor.
We're going to bleed out these buildings. And then we're really losing the common sense of equity. We're talking about equity and access because what has occurred in our schools is we have failed to see what that looks like. So when we talk about short-term solutions, you better be talking about 12 months, 18
Now,
months.
and realistically, that would, if we're moving forward with a project at Nelson County, we'd have to get the process, it would be more than that. It would be significantly more than that. And our bonding capacity, even if you look at the experts, Nelson County is going to be very expensive. What needs to happen at the ATC, in addition to obviously the grant money, is going to be expensive. 18 months, we will not have replenished enough to do that.
And so
What, the
it's
bonding
been-
capacity?
It would be a short
The
term,
bonding
several
capacity?
years.
I think what we heard from the experts was this fall, the projected bonding capacity would be up to
55 million.
And then next year it would be up
It's
to
2026. It was between
It's up to
75 to 94
on the
million.
low end. And it does. It takes a year to come up with a set of design documents between the BG1s, between actually doing the stakeholder input. I mean, that's why all of last year was spent just to come up with the design documents for the community campus. It took a year to do that. So again, I'm agreeing with what you're saying, Ms. Bowling. If we say, well, short term could be a year or 2 or 3, well, add another year or 2 or 3 on top of that, and now we're 6 years down the road, and we've kicked the can as a board, as a community, and we're still saying, yep, we got a problem with the middle school equity. Don't know.
Well, we can't do it all, y'all. We cannot do everything at once. We can't.
I think what we've heard from the experts is that there is a way to domino and do it.
We got bigger problems than buildings, guys. I don't know if y'all took my hand.
We're
a while
not
ago, we got
talking
bigger
about
problems than
buildings,
Henning.
Mr. Norman.
Yes,
You
we are. We
continue
got
to
bigger problems than
say
buildings.
it's about
Buildings.
buildings. It is not about buildings. It is
Okay.
about providing for our students what they deserve. And if what they deserve ends up being something that looks a little bit different with brick and mortar, then that's the way it is. But if all we want to say is, oh, we're only talking about buildings, no, that's not what we're talking about. We have been talking for 2 years about middle school inequities. For 2 years. And we're still kicking the can, aren't we?
We can't have this conversation without bringing up, I know you want to talk about academics. I want to talk about one little portion here. Do you know how many kids from New Haven and Boston take advantage of this building and what's in it?
I guess
How
it's
many
zero.
From Okeechobee Home takes advantage of this building.
12%. 12% of kids from Boston and New Haven take advantage of what's going on here.
Great.
No, it's not.
No.
I think we need more. We can't.
Here's the thing. You have kids. Mr. Cottrell, right?
IT.
In 20
Yep.
years, yeah, his IT, in 20 years in this building, he can say 5 kids from Boston to New Haven have went through his program. And I can tell you why, and every educator, I can point to any teacher out here and say, tell me why Boston and New Haven kids aren't interested in science. Miss Tiffany Clark, stand up and tell me why New Haven kids are not interested in
Currently, they
science.
don't have access to that, so that would be,
Yeah.
they don't have access to some of those.
So if
They
kids,
don't have a lab, we don't have running water in those places.
so if we want our kids to be, what'd you say, smarter? If we want our kids to be
Prepare for
smarter,
their job.
but
future
I'll
job,
say it
what
even,
I'm saying.
I'll say it a little bit differently. If we want our kids to be prepared for the world, then you better give them access to this building. And you better give them access to more than one science class. And you better give them access to more than one math class or one history class. If you want them to be excited about learning, it's going to take more than one science teacher. It's going to take more than one math teacher. They need a whole crew of people to say, where are we going to learn? How are we going to learn? And it may take 3 or 4 tries on 3 or 4 different teachers, which we don't have at Boston. You don't have at New Haven. They get one shot. For 3 years, they get one shot. 3. Because they're with the same teacher for 3 years. You're not engaging those kids. We have to get them out of those buildings.
And that's what
And-
we're trying to do.
And so when
And I
we say we
understand
can't
that.
talk
That's what
about
we're trying
buildings,
to do.
When you talk about we need our kids to be smarter and we need to stop talking about buildings, this is not about buildings. This is about talking about getting our kids not smarter. Our kids are
Access.
smart. We need them to understand and love learning. And
need
that is
Well,
where we
that,
need them to
that
be.
goes with access to learning.
It 100%
Yes.
goes with access.
Yes, well,
And that's what we're missing out on all of these conversations. We have to be truthful here. If what we need to do is short term so that we can get Boston and New Haven in a better place and give them breathing room, then that has to be short term. But I can promise you, what you all are discussing and how you are presenting it is not looking short term. It is looking like a 5 or 6 year plan. And we know, the people in our buildings know, it is intentional. This is all being done intentional. And that is the part that no one wants to say out loud. Just say it. Say, listen, we do not want to close Bloomfield. We want to do whatever we can do to keep that building open. Then let's talk about how that's going to happen.
Tracy, that is not the case. If we're looking at using existing facilities, okay, if we're looking at, it is not ideal. It is not ideal where our schools are located. But we only have X amount of dollars, okay? And I'm looking at how do we meet the most urgent needs within, we can meet the need for equity right away. It isn't perfect, it doesn't solve feeder patterns, but we can meet that right away. And I think we may all agree that is the main thing, the main issue. I think Damon said that's number one, and I agree with that. Okay, so it's not maybe a permanent solution, but it would open up the funding to do other wonderful things, to expand the ATC.
So to open up funding, like I said, I think if we're going to open up funding and if we're going to talk about sustainability in opening up funding, we have to look at the 8-12 model, and which includes moving the 8th graders to the high schools and putting the 6th and 7th graders, all the 6th and 7th graders, so that there's an even playing field there. And we know that those kids are going to be divided. We know that mass of students will be divided amongst the high school, and then it's intentional. So that when we're looking at intention, and we're being thoughtful about where we're putting students. We know short-term, we can put the 8th graders in the high schools. We have space, we have educators that are chomping at the bit to give them access and opportunity. And then we bring these 6th and 7th grade kids together, and we know that they're gonna divide. We know that because we're intentional about what that looks like. Then that has to me, if we're gonna really talk about short-term gains, then that's the plan we need to be talking about. All of this other stuff is just kicking the can.
When you say divide, are you talking about like at OKH?
It's got
That some
feeders.
kids would go to Nelson County, some would be going to
Right,
Thomas Nelson?
so
Which
that
is
would
also one of the
fix-
problems we're trying to fix.
Right,
Yeah.
which it's not gonna be, again, this is a short term because we're gonna crowd that building out.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if that's possible. I mean, I'm assuming because we're moving the 8th graders that we would have the space.
Well, you've got
And
an
I'm
8th
air
grade,
quoting that.
you've got a freshman wing that you can put 8th graders in.
So what would that look like short term? And would that still lead us to a district facility plan that addresses 100% New Haven, 100% Nelson County High School, and this building as well, which is already, on the plan? These are all still parts of the district facility plan. We just truly compromise what the strategy was going to be around that. So I think that is where we have to be when we're talking truth. Let's just lay it on the table. Look at the district facility plan and say, okay, what can we do? We still end up creating this futuristic plan for Nelson County, but we just move the money differently, and we move it differently. Everything still happens. It just may not happen in our original layout.
And the one thing we also, I think, in that approach would have to be willing to look at, even though people can request to go out of area, we're going to have to look at some redistricting within our district as well. I mean, the Woodlawn conversation will come up, because if we want to keep those kids in
If you-
Cox's Creek, Deatsville, and
I do not want to send
245.
Woodlawn children to Bloomfield. I do not want to do that. I mean,
I
I don't
wanna
think
do
that
it.
makes any sense
Oh,
for
no,
them
it
to make
doesn't.
a
It
right
doesn't.
onto Bloomfield Road to go to Bloomfield.
It doesn't
I
at
don't-
all.
So just to clear the air, like that isn't, I don't think,
Yeah,
a rational solution.
But
so.
we're going to have to think about something, because OKH will not be able to handle, as well as we've got a Bloomfield Middle School then that will have 250 kids, OKH 500 kids. We're going to have inequities there.
So
I mean,
it sounds like you guys are talking about two different options. So Tracy's saying move all the 6th and 7th graders to OKH. You're saying move some to Bloomfield, move some to OKH.
well,
That's on an 8 through 12
no,
plan.
I'm basing upon taking all the 8th graders and putting them at Nelson County High School and Thomas Nelson High School.
Yeah, and
which
they
then
said 6th,
means you've
7th.
got 6th and 7th graders.
No, just at OKH.
Oh, so in other words, Bloomfield Middle School's just done.
Because then you're giving the general
Okay.
funds the relief we need there.
Okay,
And then you're also sort of creating that more thoughtful process around the feeders. That would be again, right now, if we look at option 1, both of those schools will be divided. So all of those kids that are growing up together and learning together and playing together all get separated.
so at
Now,
OKH, it'd be kind of
they
like
would
an
still
early
separate.
middle school's academy. That's just a made-up word there.
Right.
That it has all 6th and 7th
7th
graders for
graders.
the whole district at, but then some of them will be at Nelson County High School eventually, and some of them will be over as 8th graders at
Well, let's
Thomas
look at
Nelson.
transportation. I know Jeff already left out of here, but let's look at transportation, for instance. And I know this is taking time, and I apologize to you all.
No,
But I
it's
feel
good
like this needs to
discussion.
happen.
It's the
So
discussion that needs to happen.
If we have kids if we have 6th and 7th graders at OKH, and that's
Mm-hmm.
all 6th and 7th graders at OKH, and it's an activity bus at the end of the day, that's 1 or 2 activity, well, maybe just 1, because we have kids that can just go to Nelson
Mm-hmm.
County, and then we have 1 bus that can go to Thomas Nelson. That's thoughtful thinking. Otherwise, we're going to have 2 activity buses going from 2 different schools, and then these kids are going to be split. We're thoughtful in what we're talking about when we're moving these kids around. This is not about buildings. This is about how are we going to access these kids and get them into the places they need to be. Again, this is not a long-term solution. I want to clear this. Coming from me, this is not a long-term solution.
So
This gets us
so do you,
a little further out.
do you guys want to continue to talk about what we had as option one, which was the Old Kentucky Home conversation and an 8 through 12 version of that? That's, I guess, the only thing I'm hearing right now.
Well, you're only hearing from me. I'm just rambling. So you have to hear.
I just moved the numbers around up there.
Blunt about what I'm seeing. That's if we're going to not move forward with our current district facility plan that's approved, and we want to find compromise in that. So the district facility plan, and again, this is me just talking out loud. District facility plan is still approved plan, but we need to compromise somehow in how the layout of that was going to happen. We want to hit New Haven, Nelson County High School. We want to make sure that the money is spent there first. What I'm hearing from Amanda and David. And
I think it's very, Amanda just said it, but let's move along. Let's move forward with things we can move with, and let's discuss the other stuff. There's things we can move along with.
We would allow the breathing room for Boston and New Haven. We would get those kids in a better place. The 8th graders would be in the high schools. The 6th and 7th graders would be thoughtful in how they were planned out, again, short term. And then it would also give us as a board to say, okay, what are some of the things that we can do financially that's going to sustain us?
Right now, I guess the question to the board as we look at this over the next, we would need to be talking about this for a couple months, obviously, before we would put anything even on the table for principals to consider in the planning process. The 8 through 12 conversation, board members that are interested in entertaining that as a conversation, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think everything we talked about tonight is worthy of being talked about as a conversation. I think the 2 middle school, 2 high school, I think the 8 through 12, I mean, I think all of it could be fleshed out.
So I was told not to use the word conversation by someone this week. So are we interested in number 3 as a plan, a facility plan model that would be, in theory, a short-term plan that would achieve equity, would provide access to 8th graders sooner, would be a way for us to begin to think about what it looks like to be more innovative and align some of those feeder patterns sooner so that teams and families can unite together.
I think the only thing different that I've heard that Ms. Bowling has provided clarification on is while it's an 8-12 high school, it's a single building with all 6 and 7 in it, which is the only thing that's different than the graphic I'm seeing there.
And again, we're still at capacity, which is not a good thing. But 6th and 7th graders may be a little easier to handle. I still am not happy about having a school at capacity.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think this is the hard part, and this is why these decisions are not left up to school boards. This is why you have to have teachers at the table. You have to have principals, administrators at the table so that they can look at this and they can look us in the face and say, listen, no, that's not going to work. This is crazy.
And it's why the LPC isn't made up of 5 school board members. It's made up of, in our case, 19 people.
So my question is, how do we engage the community? If the forums, I mean, were you all okay with the forums? Did you feel like that they were useful or not useful? I'm not asking you.
Not when the same people show up.
Well, and, you know, and that's the nature of the beast is, I think, people are generally reactive. And so, you know, you get the same people and that's okay. I mean, you know, there's some people that are very invested in it. The forum itself, the issue I had with it was we were still considering on paper a community campus plan that had not, you know, was not viable with the current board makeup. It wasn't going to pass. So I feel like any time that we spend on that is time we're wasting. That's my only issue with the forum.
My pushback on that would be that there was a compromise that Diane put out to multiple people over the last few weeks, which was basically a detached middle school at Thomas Nelson, along with a cafeteria, right? So the point of the community campus plan, but the point of that plan,
It can be eventually. We have to work with what we've got. The immediate, to me, the immediate deal. No, Tiffany, you know that's not right. What has to be done right, it has to be done in accordance to what is important. Your need right now is for middle schoolers to be able to join in, to be able to come together and be taught. Equity for all middle schoolers, okay? That's got to be the first priority. If you even if you call the next group, like the LPC or whatever, it still has to be planned, it still has to be voted on, it still has to be drawings, it still has to do all that stuff, because it's not gonna be an add-on. That's my problem. I've had it for 2 years. I don't want 6th through 12th graders. I don't care what anybody, you can preach at me all you want to, but I won't vote for it. That's what I've said for 2 years, and I meant it.
Yes, you have been very adamant.
That's right, and that's the point. Yeah,
So there were
that's the way
two-
I am.
But there were
Too
two
bad.
compromises, basically.
Talk to my mother about it, sorry.
Well, I think I want it, and I guess it's more of a question. So these same kids at Boston and New Haven that have been in K-8s their whole K-8 years.
Well, no, not their whole, not in Boston.
Okay. K-8 students, my daughter went all through Boston, K-8, 9 years. She then went to the high school. Now, if it was a community campus, and I'm really starting to dislike that term, community campus model.
Can we call it the Liberty Campus or the Freedom Campus?
So if she would have went there, and then her 5th grade brother would have went right along with her because he would have been going into 6th grade, she's been with him the whole time. She's been with these kids the whole time. These kids have been together. These same kids that you're assuming hit 9th grade and turn into thugs have been together since they were in 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So what changed?
What do you mean what changed? You
They
grow
were-
up. You grow up. You belong independent-wise. You get.
I feel like it's like
practice.
we've turned the corner of unproductive.
Yeah, we have.
I really.
This is it. Whoa, that's enough. That's enough. Our next issue, not an issue, see, you even got me thinking an issue. The students and shareholder engagement,
Well,
our next board
Isn't-
calendar
isn't-
meet will
Isn't
be,
there something, though, that we need to answer for the superintendent first?
what?
So is there any plan that anyone out of these 9 currently that we want to take seriously? I don't say that,
No,
I'm,
because we have to move forward, right?
Yes, we're
Because-
gonna move forward.
Yeah.
You can take the 2 plans, it seems like to me, what Ms. Bowling has said was a 8th grade at the high school, correct?
Doing an 8-12 and
Doing
a
an
6.
8-12 and doing a,
All the 6 and 7 at OKH, but then we need to get some community feedback on that. I
hey,
think
but I'm
that's
just
what,
saying,
I think
that's,
that's what
I would be
Superintendent
in favor
Bradley, we
of
owe
looking
an
at number
answer to him.
1. I guess that's the one that we discussed, with
Which-
the 2 high schools, 2 middle schools.
right.
okay,
Yeah.
so Mr.
So
Bradley,
1
that's
and
what
3.
you're gonna, do what? I'm
So
sorry.
1 and 3.
Yeah, that's narrowing
think
it
that's
down to
right.
1.
Okay, 1 and 3.
Okay, 1 and 3, got it?
All right.
Okay, good. The dog is needing help right now, right, Miss Berry? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, our next one is student and shareholder engagement board calendar. I'm trying to get.
So we will be back next week. June is a unique time, and because of the policy and procedure update. And next week, we will be looking at the timeline on the Up Center, the master plan for the Nelson County campus, as well as a number of other facility action pieces, potentially the bus garage. So those are a few pieces for next week. And
Can you put all of the data that you collected for those forums, can you do a talking piece and like put it on YouTube? Or can you start presenting that somehow so that more of our community can hear it? Because how are we going to get the feedback? I think we go back to that question is how are we going to decide in the end what option is best for our community? Now, is that really going to be left up to these 5 people?
Well, it generally
That's what it
is.
should be.
so I would say that we could definitely summarize some of the information and share it out with families this summer. As you know, most people will go to vacation throughout the summer, but I think as we look towards June and July, there's an opportunity to just share some of the information out. And it'll be there next week. We'll be in the same exact spot,
Here.
right here.
But like, the data and stuff that you presented and
Yes, the data.
figure out.
It
how to
is
get
on
that out.
ncslpc.com. but we could definitely do some additional layers of communication. I think, one issue we have is I've been told that when I do share the data, it's propaganda. I just want everybody to know it's just data related to the facility planning process, and that's part of my job is to share the data and make sure that we're making those decisions based on that data. So I just wanted to be clear because I know that there's a assumption that when we do that, that information leads people
But
to
that's
believe.
not coming from your board. Your board is the one that's giving you permission to give this out, right? I mean.
You're encouraging it right now. That's basically you're saying that we need to share the data.
It needs to be out.
Right.
Like that data needs to be out there because if we're gonna have
Definitely.
feedback from our community, I want them to go off feedback that's factual.
Okay, with that being said, our board calendar, we are to meet next week at,
They're right in this room.
okay. With that being said, I need a motion to adjourn the regular session.
Motion.
Thank you. Mr. Norman, do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Deaton. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.